Hi, I'm Keisha, and this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my baby's naming ceremony. But when my mother-in-law stood up, screamed, "That's not her name," in front of everyone and kicked me out of my own house, something inside me snapped. I walked out holding my newborn, and the deed to the house she tried to claim as hers. You'd think that would be the worst of it. But what if I told you she forged hospital documents, tried to rename my daughter, and rewrote our family story while everyone watched? What do you do when silence doesn't protect you anymore? And what happens when the one person who was supposed to protect you stays quiet? The house was buzzing with voices, perfume, and the scent of sweet buttercream. Balloons bobbed along the ceiling, pink and gold, each string anchored to tiny glittered place cards that read, "Linda Jr." I stood in the foyer holding my daughter, Lyra, and for a moment I wondered if I had walked into the wrong celebration. Everywhere I turned, there it was. Her name. Not my daughter's, not the one I had whispered during midnight feedings while still pregnant, not the name etched into the tiny silver bracelet my mother left me. No, this was Velma's name. My mother-in-law had claimed this child publicly, loudly, and with icing on a cake the size of a cooler. My smile was the kind people wear when their stomachs are tightening. I nodded at well-wishers, hugging women I barely knew from her church circle. "She's beautiful," one said, "carrying on the legacy." Another added, "Your MIL must be so proud. What a gift to be named after her." I blinked and thanked them. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. Velma moved through the crowd like a senator, hugging, laughing, receiving praise as if she had personally delivered Lyra into this world. She paused near the punch bowl, waved a hand and shouted, "Let's gather for the toast in 15. Then she turned to me briefly and smiled. "You might want to fix Lyra's headband, honey. She's the star today." Honey, I wanted to spit. I walked into the kitchen, needing air, or at least a wall between me and the chaos. Jarrell stood by the fridge, sipping from a red cup, thumbing through his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. "Did you know about the cake?" I asked, my voice level but barely. He looked up slowly, caught. "Yeah, Mom got it made a few days ago. She was really excited, Quiche. It's just a name on frosting. Don't make it a big thing." I stared. "It's not just frosting, Jarrell. It's our daughter's identity." "And you didn't think to stop her?" "She's your mother too now," he mumbled, a line I had heard one too many times. "Can't we just let her have this? She's getting older. She's been dreaming about a granddaughter for years." "No," I said. "She's been dreaming about a trophy, and she just printed her name on mine." Jarrell sighed and turned his back to me. And right then I knew. I wasn't mad at Velma. Not fully. She was a fire. It was what fires do. I was furious at the man who kept handing her matches. Back in the guest room, I placed Lyra gently in the bassinet, her tiny fingers curled instinctively around mine. On the rocking chair nearby sat a folded quilt, hand-stitched by my mother, Marcelle. Soft lavender thread wove patterns of stars and names. One in particular, Lyra. It wasn't coincidence. The last time I saw my mother, her voice had been barely above a whisper. "Lyra," she murmured as I held her hand. "It means music in the heavens." She had never known she was naming my child, but I had. I ran my fingers over the quilt. This name wasn't chosen from tradition or ego. It was chosen from love, memory, and the quiet echo of someone who never demanded to be remembered, only hoped to be. The clinking of glasses brought me back. I stepped into the living room as Velma raised her flute of champagne. "To little Linda Jr.," she said, beaming. "May she carry the grace of generations, strong, proud, and rooted in her grandmother's legacy." Applause filled the room. I stood still, fists clenched beneath the tablecloth. My lips pressed together so tight they trembled. She didn't just rename my child, she erased my mother. She erased me. If she calls her that one more time, I swear I'll walk out. The clink of champagne glasses still echoed when I took a single step forward. My voice was calm, but my chest burned. Her name is Lyra. The room stopped. No one spoke. The air thickened. Half-filled flutes were suspended mid-toast like frozen relics. Velma's smile dropped so fast it felt like the ground tilted. She turned slowly, her head cocked to the side like she'd misheard me. "Excuse me?" Her voice was still sugary, but her eyes were already knives. "I said, her name is Lyra," I repeated, louder this time. "Not Linda Jr., that was never her name." A hushed gasp from someone in the back. Someone else's phone buzzed on the counter, but no one moved to silence it. All eyes darted between us, the tension unbearable, like waiting for thunder after lightning. Velma set her champagne flute on the table with exaggerated care, then lifted a stack of pastel pink announcement cards from the cake table. She held one in the air. "You don't get to decide this alone," she snapped. "We are a family. We honor those who came before us. This child, my granddaughter, is part of that legacy." "And I'm her mother," I said, every syllable firm. "And this legacy doesn't get to trample over her identity." Her voice rose, shrill now. "You live in my house, eat my food, and you dare say I don't have a say? What kind of ingrate bites the hand that feeds them?" "I'm not biting anything," I answered. "I'm drawing a line." A few guests had quietly stepped back, inching toward the hallway. Others glanced around nervously, unsure if they were still at a party or if this had become a court hearing without notice. Velma's hand shook as she waved the printed cards in the air. "I paid for this. I organized this. Everyone already knows her name. It's on the banners, on the invitations. It's too late to undo it." "Then you shouldn't have done it in the first place." She stepped forward, her face flushed. "You want to rewrite everything? Just erase me from history because you had a dream about some name no one in this family has ever heard of?" "This isn't about you," I said flatly. "This is about Lyra. This is about my mother." "She's gone!" Velma shouted, the room audibly inhaling. "She's not here. I am. I'm the one who supported you, covered for you, made this house a home." My throat was dry, but I refused to blink. "You didn't make this house a home. You made it yours." I saw her expression shift. Not just fury, something else. A flash of panic. Then she screamed, pointing toward the door. "Get out of my house!" No one moved. Jarrell stood frozen near the hallway, eyes wide, mouth half open like he couldn't quite believe what was happening. I turned to him. "Well?" I asked. He didn't speak, just looked down. That silence, his silence, cut deeper than her screaming ever could. For a brief moment I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was free. I walked past the crowd, through the hallway, into the nursery. No one followed. I picked up Lyra from the bassinet, kissed her forehead, then opened the file cabinet in the corner and pulled out the red folder. The deed to the house. My mother's last will. My documents. I held them close, pressing them to my chest with one arm while Lyra slept against the other. From the living room, Velma shrieked, "Don't you dare walk out like this!" But I was already walking, down the hallway, past the decorations, through the front door. I didn't slam it, but the silence I left behind did louder damage than 1,000 words. The silence on the walk home wasn't peaceful. It pulsed. Each step down our street sounded sharper, like the gravel under my shoes was screaming back at everything I hadn't said in that living room. Lyra was asleep against my chest, her breath soft, steady. I envied that calm. She didn't know the name being weaponized above her head. She didn't know her mother had just been told, again, that her voice didn't matter. I tightened my grip around her and kept walking. Inside the house, the air was still, undisturbed. I laid Lyra gently in her crib and stood watching her for a moment, searching her face for any trace of me. Then I went to the old rocking chair, the one that creaked even when I wasn't moving. The quilt lay folded over the back. My mother's hands had made this. Her stitches were never even, but they held like truth. I pulled it into my lap. The lavender threads were faded now, but in the light, I could still make out her careful pattern, stars, constellations, and one name stitched in the corner. Lyra. She had whispered it once, months before she passed. I was rubbing lotion into her thinning arms, and she said, almost absently, "Lyra, that name sounds like something meant to sing through time." I hadn't told her then I was already pregnant. I didn't want to share that news while I was watching her fade, but now I realize maybe she already knew. Her voice echoed again in my mind. If they ever try to erase you, remind them who you came from. A single tear fell, but I wiped it away quickly. Not from weakness, but clarity. I wasn't fighting Velma for power. I was fighting to protect something sacred. The room darkened as the sun disappeared. I turned on the lamp just as my phone buzzed on the edge of the dresser. Unknown number. I hesitated. Something about the timing felt off. I answered. "Hello?" A man's voice came through, raspy, hesitant. "Keisha." "Yes?" "This is Devin, Velma's son. Her other one. I saw the video. I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. My mind raced. I had heard about him. Estranged, disappeared after a blowout years ago. Velma called him ungrateful, said he'd abandoned the family. "She did that to me too," he said. "What do you mean?" "When my wife gave birth to our daughter, I was deployed overseas. I came home and found out my mother had changed the name on the birth certificate. Told everyone she had permission. Told my wife she was unstable. Said it was her responsibility to carry on our family name." My stomach flipped. She called the baby Velma Jr. behind our backs, had blankets made, announcements, like she was the mother. "And you?" I asked. She made sure everyone believed I was the problem, said I turned my back on family, said my wife was mentally unwell. I tried to fight it. But when everyone you know only hears her version, you get tired. You disappear. I closed my eyes. She's not unhinged. She's strategic. Devin let out a sharp exhale. Exactly. Everyone thinks she's just passionate, but she's precise. Every move is intentional. There was a long pause. "She doesn't see us as people," he said. "Just tools for her legacy." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "She erased us in her own name." He whispered, "I'm sorry, it's your turn now." After we hung up, I sat in the dark. Lyra's crib glowed faintly in the hallway. I listened to the silence, not the kind that crushes you, but the kind that opens your eyes. Velma hadn't lost control today. She followed a blueprint, and I'd stepped into it, thinking this was spontaneous chaos. It wasn't. It was a pattern, one she'd used before. But patterns only work when no one sees them coming. And I wasn't blind anymore. I opened my laptop and clicked on the folder I'd labeled earlier that year. Velma. Evidence. At the time it felt petty, even paranoid. Now it felt necessary. If I wanted to protect Lyra, I needed more than memories. I needed proof. The morning after felt like stepping into a room where a storm had passed, but the air still buzzed with static. I hadn't slept. Not really. I'd closed my eyes, but every time I drifted, I was back in that living room, surrounded by balloons and betrayal. Lyra stirred beside me, oblivious. I placed a hand gently on her back, feeling her breathe, needing that rhythm to steady my own. The house was quiet, unnaturally so. No television, no Velma's heels clicking across the floors, no Jorel making coffee in the kitchen like he did every morning without fail. Just a silence that scraped at my thoughts. Silence is a high price to pay for dignity, I muttered to myself, brushing a strand of hair from Lyra's cheek. But I'd pay it again. My phone, charging on the nightstand, blinked with notifications. Reluctantly, I unlocked it. Voicemails, texts, missed calls, most from numbers I recognized, friends, relatives, church people. One message started with, "Hey girl, I wasn't there, but I heard. What happened?" Another said, "It's probably just a misunderstanding. Velma didn't mean anything by it." A few texts were harsher. "Was that really necessary? You embarrassed your whole family. You should have just talked to her." I read every word, but it all blurred together. It always amazed me how fast people had opinions when they hadn't been there, when they hadn't heard her shout, when they hadn't seen my husband do absolutely nothing. And yet, the most dangerous voices were the neutral ones, the ones that said nothing but implied everything. "It's a family thing. She's just emotional. Don't make a scene. When a woman yells," I whispered, "she's unstable. When a man stays silent, he's composed." I locked my screen. Later that morning, while feeding Lyra in the nursery, I opened my laptop to distract myself and landed on the church's live stream from the service Velma hadn't missed. I clicked play, more out of masochism than curiosity. The pastor stood at the pulpit, voice calm, warm, familiar. "Let us pray for families going through transitions, for those experiencing conflict within the home. Let us remember to act with honor, even when others do not." My jaw tightened. I didn't need a name to recognize a narrative. The comments flooded in during the sermon. "Praying for your strength, Velma. We stand with you, sister. Your grace in the face of betrayal is inspiring." "She's not just spinning her side," I said aloud. "She's scripting mine." The next morning, after leaving Lyra with a neighbor for a quick errand, I drove to the church. I didn't plan it. I just ended up in the parking lot. And once I was there, walking into the office felt automatic. The pastor greeted me kindly, like he hadn't just taken a side from the pulpit. "I want to talk," I said. "About Sunday." "Of course," he replied, offering a seat. "You called me dishonorable." Without saying my name, but everyone knew. "I never intended," I cut him off. "Intentions don't excuse impact. You don't get to call for peace while justifying a woman who publicly tried to rename my child." He folded his hands. "Velma has been a part of this community for decades. She's donated, led groups, organized fundraisers. And that means she's above accountability?" "I didn't say that." "No," I said, rising from the chair. "You just implied it." Outside, I sat in my car, hands on the steering wheel. There were no tears, no rage, just a decision forming like ice. Back home, I opened my files. Velma was listed as an emergency contact for Lyra's pediatrician. She had a duplicate key to my house. She had her name attached to Lyra's daycare pre-registration forms. Slowly, I began drafting the emails, making the calls, removing her, erasing her access. For the first time, I called my lawyer. Not to threaten, not to posture, just to start building the wall she'd never cross again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I acted. I might be silent, but I'm not still. And the next move? It's mine. Midweek came faster than I expected. Or maybe I just hadn't been sleeping enough to track the days properly. Either way, I woke up that morning to the buzzing of my phone before the sun had a chance to touch the windows. I groaned, reached for it on the nightstand, and opened a string of new notifications. "Are you okay? Your MIL had a panic attack. Everyone's talking about it. You really embarrassed the family." She was just trying to keep tradition alive. And then, one message that made me laugh, not out loud, but in that hollow way only bitterness can laugh. You know she meant well. When people don't like your truth, they invent their own. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I lay there, the phone still in my hand, eyes focused on nothing. Velma was good, very good. She hadn't just started rewriting the story. She'd already published the first draft and passed out copies. Later that morning, while I was feeding Lyra and trying to stomach lukewarm coffee, I called the hospital. I needed to confirm that Lyra's official birth documents still reflected the name I had given her. A young woman answered and transferred me twice before someone finally offered a clipped response. "Sorry, Nurse Maya no longer works here." She was reassigned to a different unit. Maya was the one who confirmed Lyra's name at birth. She had been kind, reassuring, and exact. The kind of nurse who remembered names and held space for new mothers even when the paperwork stacked up. She was also the only person who witnessed me filling out Lyra's name on the form before Velma ever stepped into the room. Velma didn't lash out. She cleaned up her tracks. I ended the call, feeling the simmer start to boil again under my ribs. It didn't matter how gracious Velma looked on the outside. I knew now. Every move she made was calculated. By noon, I had a front row seat to the next act, the family group chat. It started with a long message from Velma, paragraphs, no punctuation spared. "I just want everyone to know I never meant to upset anyone. I've always acted in the best interest of this family, and especially my sweet granddaughter. It's heartbreaking that my love was twisted into something cruel. I was humiliated in my own home, and I'm still recovering emotionally." Then came the reactions. Heart emojis, praying hands. "So sorry you're going through this, Velma. We love you." I waited, watching the dots on the screen dance as someone typed and then stopped. Then I replied, just once. "Your intentions don't erase your actions." Silence. Then one cousin replied with, "Well, that was cold." Another, "Maybe a phone call would have been better than this." And then someone else left the group entirely. I closed the app. I had no interest in defending myself to people who only saw what they wanted to see. And that afternoon, I sat at the dining room table with a notepad, laptop open beside me. Lyra was napping and the house was finally still. I called my lawyer. "I need to start a paper trail," I said. "Not for today, for what's coming." He didn't ask why. He simply said, "Let's begin with access revocations. Medical, school, home, anywhere she's listed." By early evening, I had letters drafted for Lyra's pediatrician, her future daycare, and the property records office. I also ordered a new lock for the front door and made a mental note to check who else still had keys to my life. Later that night, I pulled an old journal out from a storage box. I hadn't written in it for a while. The last entry was from 2 years ago. A line jumped out at me. "Maybe if I keep things calm long enough, she'll stop testing me." I read it 3 times, heart slowing with each pass. For years, I'd been shrinking myself to fit into Velma's idea of who I should be. I kept my voice low so hers could stay high. I bent so she wouldn't break. I called it maturity. It was survival. But not anymore. No more shrinking to keep the peace. I closed the journal, set it on the desk, and clicked record on my phone. "This is for the record. If anything happens next, it won't be undocumented." By Friday evening, I had turned my dining room into a war room. The baby monitor sat quietly beside my laptop. Lyra's soft breathing buzzed through the speaker while I surrounded myself with screenshots, printouts, handwritten notes, and digital voice memos. I didn't eat dinner. I didn't even notice the sun had gone until the streetlights cast long shadows across the papers. They thought I would walk away and forget. I was walking, but not forgetting. The footage from the naming ceremony, taken by one of Jarrell's cousins, was shakier than I remembered, but Velma's voice rang clear, her face flushed, arms raised, commanding attention like a politician mid-campaign. "This is my house, my family, and she thinks she can walk in here and rename my granddaughter like I'm already dead." My thumb hovered over the pause button, but I let the video finish. I wasn't collecting pain. I was collecting proof. The next morning, I sat across from my lawyer in a quiet, window-lined office that smelled faintly of pine cleaner and legal dust. "We can begin by filing a formal revocation of any emergency contacts, school authorizations, and medical access," he said, fingers already dancing across his keyboard. "Do we need to explain why?" I asked. He didn't look up. "No, you don't need chaos to prove she's unstable. You need consistency. Paper, dates, witnesses." I leaned forward. "That, she has plenty of." I was about to leave when there was a knock on the front door. It was Aunt Darcel holding a flash drive in her hand like it was a live grenade. "I didn't want to get in the middle," she said softly, stepping inside. "But I recorded everything that day, just in case." I stared at her, surprised. Darcel was the kind of woman who believed in minding her business and praying quietly behind the scenes, but something in her voice told me she'd seen enough. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and clicked the only file inside. Velma's voice filled the room, crisp and venom-laced. "She's just a vessel. Lyra's mine. She just pushed her out." I froze. Darcel didn't speak. She just stood beside the window, arms folded. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Velma hadn't been speaking to me. She'd been talking to one of her church friends, in the hallway, just outside the nursery. She didn't know she was being recorded. She can do the feeding, the diapers, whatever. But when it comes to the name, that's my right. My granddaughter, my legacy. I've waited my whole life for this. The audio kept going. I stopped it at the 6-minute mark. I couldn't listen anymore. But I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just opened my secure cloud account and uploaded the file to a folder labeled Exhibits. The audio would be time-stamped, archived, backed up. If this ends in court, I'll walk in with more than pain. I'll walk in with proof. That night, after putting Lyra down and locking every door in the house, I filed the official petition to restrict Velma's legal access to anything involving my daughter. The forms were dry, clinical, but I filled in every field like they were battle lines. Emergency access, revoked. School pickup permissions, removed. Healthcare decision-making, voided. When I hit submit, my hands didn't shake. The courtroom date was marked 2 weeks from now. I closed my laptop slowly, eyes fixed on the reflection of myself in the darkened screen. I didn't recognize the woman staring back, but I respected her. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me a few minutes later. I played the message. Velma's voice came through, low and furious. "You think taking her name off paper takes her out of my life? I built this family. You'll see." I didn't think much of the envelope when I pulled it from the mailbox that morning, just another bill or notice. But when I saw the pediatric clinic's letterhead and the subject line, "Correction request for patient Linda Jr." My stomach dropped so fast it nearly took the floor with it. I called the office immediately, one hand trembling as I held the phone, the other steadying Lyra on my hip. The receptionist was polite but confused, reading from her screen. It looks like there was a name correction form submitted late last week. It was processed Monday morning. Submitted by who? It lists, your mother-in-law, Velma. The line went quiet for a second, as if she herself didn't know what to say next. She used your name as an authorizing signature. I couldn't speak. She forged it, I finally said. I'm so sorry, Ms. Jacobs. We can flag it and begin the reversal process today. You'll need to come in with ID and complete the affidavit. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat down at the kitchen table before my knees gave out. This wasn't just another power play. This was identity theft, wrapped in baby pink. A few hours later, I called the daycare where I had pre-enrolled Lyra for the fall. I wanted to get ahead of whatever else Velma had decided to correct. The director answered, her tone cheerful until I gave my name. Oh, yes. Your mother-in-law stopped by last week. She dropped off a check and asked us to register your daughter as Linda Jr. She said you were stepping back for a while, and she'd be handling the details. I blinked. Stepping back? She mentioned the stress of new motherhood and said she was assuming temporary care responsibilities. Let me stop you right there, I said, my voice flat. She must have mistaken generosity for custody. I understand, she said, quickly. Would you like to schedule a time to come in and update the records? Yes, today, and I'll be bringing legal documents. I ended the call and immediately reached out to my attorney. He listened without interrupting, then simply said, "It's time to escalate." That afternoon, we filed for formal complaints, one for document forgery, another for attempted identity manipulation. We attached emails, scanned donation receipts, and even the forged pediatric form with her fake signature. I compiled screenshots from every message Velma had sent me that hinted, no, outright stated, that she was taking control for Lyra's good. She thought she could rewrite reality with charm and money, but I had something she didn't: paper trails. By evening, things got louder. Screenshots from the daycare forms began circulating on a local mom's Facebook group. I hadn't shared them, someone else had. Probably a staff member tired of watching the circus unfold. Velma responded publicly with a post that read, "When mothers abandon legacy, grandmothers must step in. I won't apologize for loving my granddaughter enough to protect what matters." The comments split like a cracked windshield. She's just a baby. Let her have her name. Velma's heart is in the right place. This is getting toxic. Keisha should be ashamed for letting family drama go public. I didn't reply. I just saved every screenshot, every comment, every reaction. The next morning, I walked into the daycare unannounced. The front desk woman blinked, then stood. "Ms. Jacobs, I'm here to file a complaint," I said calmly, "and I want every single document related to my daughter's registration placed in my hand, today." The director came out within minutes. We sat in a small meeting room. I laid out the legal papers one by one. This is the custody order. This is the guardianship proof. This is the complaint for identity manipulation. And this, I said, opening my folder, is my daughter's real name. She nodded, pale, and apologized. I asked for a printed statement acknowledging the unauthorized updates. She handed me one before I even finished the sentence. When I walked out, I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolved. That night, as I was changing Lyra into her pajamas, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. I played it on speaker. Velma's voice, tight and deliberate. "You want war? You just declared it. I will not be erased from my granddaughter's life." The courthouse smelled like worn carpet and cheap coffee. I'd been in buildings like this before, paper-colored walls, buzzing lights overhead, but never with this much weight in my chest. I clutched the file folder in my hand so tightly the corners bent. Inside were the documents I had printed and highlighted the night before. Emails, enrollment forms, screenshots of Velma's posts, and the flash drive Darcel had handed me like it was a secret weapon. Across the room, Velma stood near the pew-like bench, surrounded by two women from her church. They looked like they were dressed for Easter, not a custody hearing. Velma's hair was styled, her lipstick loud. She turned, made brief eye contact with me, and smiled. Not warmly, not apologetically, but like this was her stage and I was an uninvited extra. When the judge entered, the bailiff called for silence. We all stood, then sat. My attorney stood first, calm, measured. She requested to play a recording. The judge nodded. Darcel's voice came through first, muffled from her phone, then Velma's. She's just a vessel. Lyra's mine. She just pushed her out. The courtroom held its breath. I didn't turn to see the faces behind me, but I felt the shift in the room like a sudden draft. The air changed. Even Velma flinched, her smile dropping like a curtain yanked from a stage. She can call herself the mother if she wants, but that baby belongs to our family, not to some girl playing house because she lost hers. The judge leaned forward. Pause it. My lawyer did. The judge's voice was calm but cold. That's enough for now. Velma's attorney scrambled. Your Honor, my client was under emotional duress. These were private words, never meant for public consumption. The judge cut him off. Intentional misrepresentation of parental identity is not excused by grief. Continue. We submitted the altered forms from the pediatrician and daycare, including a copy of the check Velma had written to the daycare. Memo line, Linda Jr., enrollment. Her signature, her handwriting. Velma shifted in her seat. I didn't think she'd notice. You just what? The judge asked, eyes steady on her. You thought if you acted fast enough, the mother wouldn't catch up? I was trying to keep the family name alive, Velma mumbled, quieter now. The judge took a moment, then ruled, a temporary restraining order will be placed against Ms. Velma Jacobs, barring her from any legal, physical, or educational involvement with Lyra Jacobs until further proceedings. Further contact attempts will be treated as violations. Her church friends looked stunned. One stood and quietly slipped out. Velma sat frozen. I didn't look back when we walked out. I didn't need to. Outside the courthouse, the news spread quickly. The local moms group page lit up by mid-afternoon. Screenshots of the court documents, audio snippets, and that daycare registration form circulated like wildfire. Comments poured in. Wow, she really forged her name? Now I feel awful for doubting Keisha. Velma's been running that narrative for years. And then Twist S15 emerged. Someone leaked a series of church emails from earlier that month, ones Velma had sent to the women's group, bragging about her role in redirecting Lyra's destiny. I had to step in, she wrote. Some people aren't made for legacy work. Within hours, the same people who once sent Velma flowers now posted apologies under my name. Some tagged me. Most just watched the unraveling happen. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. That was the best way I could describe it, like fog lifting. Not joy, not relief, just clarity. I walked past the sidewalk crowd to my car. People were whispering, but none spoke directly to me. I didn't need them to. I didn't destroy her. She exposed herself. As I settled behind the steering wheel and reached for the ignition, my phone lit up. Jor-El. We hadn't spoken all day. He hadn't shown up, not to court, not to anything. The text read, "We need to talk. Tonight, Jarrell came home around 7:30 that evening. No knock, no call ahead. Just the sound of the door unlocking and his keys landing in the tray by the front door. I was already in the kitchen, pretending to wipe down the counter when I'd cleaned it twice already. He walked in slowly, like someone stepping onto thin ice. His briefcase in hand, his shirt wrinkled like he'd worn it too long. I didn't say anything. I didn't offer food or ask how his day was. He stood across the room, hovering near the edge of the doorway. "You didn't have to take it that far," he said. "I didn't even look up. You didn't have to stay silent." The space between us grew heavier. He set his briefcase down with a thud. "You embarrassed my mother in front of the whole community." "No," I said, finally turning to face him. "Your mother embarrassed herself. I just stopped covering for her. She's 63, Keisha. She was emotional. She forged legal documents," I snapped. "That's not emotional. That's criminal." He didn't respond, just shifted his weight and looked anywhere but at me. I crossed my arms. "You didn't show up to court? Not a call, not a text, but now you're here because you're worried about how this looks?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "My coworkers, they started making jokes. Said I let my mom get dragged in public. Said I should have kept my wife in check." I swallowed hard, suddenly colder. "So that's what this is about? Your pride?" "It's about optics," he said, like that explained anything. "Everyone's talking about it. My name's out there now. Our business became public because your mother made it public. Because she kept pushing. Because you kept letting her." He stood there, hands in his pockets, lips pursed, not apologizing, just uncomfortable. He cared more about how others saw him than how I had to survive. I didn't say it out loud, but he felt it. He walked past me into the hallway, muttering, "I'm gonna sleep in the guest room tonight." "Of course you are," I whispered. Later that evening, I got a message from Courtney, one of the women from the mom group I used to attend before all this exploded. She sent me a screenshot. Velma had posted a photo of Lyra, an old one from months ago. She must have saved it from a family album. The caption read, "Linda Jr., you are everything your grandmother hoped for." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. "You're such a strong matriarch. She's lucky to have you. Your grace in all of this is inspiring." I didn't cry. I didn't react. I took a screenshot and saved it in the same folder I'd titled Exhibits. That night, the house felt colder than usual. Jarrell's footsteps echoed down the hall once before the click of the guest room door closed him off. I sat on the couch with Lyra's monitor and my laptop, sorting through folders like I was organizing a battlefield. Custody. Identity fraud, personal safety. I opened a blank email and began drafting a message to a family law specialist. Just in case, I had hoped to fix the cracks. Now I see the foundation was never ours to begin with. I shut the laptop and leaned back, letting my head rest against the cushions. My phone buzzed again. "Linda Velma has tagged you in a post." Caption: "She stole my son. She erased our name, but this war isn't over." The envelope was thicker than usual, the kind that makes your stomach tighten before you even open it. It was stamped certified mail, and the return address was the county property office. I stood by the kitchen counter, Lyra in her bouncer, babbling softly while I broke the seal with a trembling hand. Velma had filed a legal challenge to the deed of my home. Her claim? Partial ownership based on emotional equity and long-standing familial investment. I sat down slowly. My hands were already reaching for the red folder from the drawer beside the fridge, the one that held every document my mother left behind, including the deed. But as I flipped through the pages, dread began to crawl up my spine. One page was missing. The signature page. I flipped through again, then again. Gone. The only person who had touched that folder since I last checked it was Velma. The same day of the naming ceremony. While I was in the hospital bathroom, she had offered to fetch something from my bag, remember? I never questioned it. Not then. I was already on the phone with my lawyer before I could even process the fury crawling under my skin. We met within the hour. She had access. She took the page and submitted a photocopy of the rest, I said, sliding the file across his desk. She's not just trying to rename my child, she's trying to rewrite me out of my own home. He scanned it silently, then nodded. We'll file an immediate opposition and a motion for injunction. Before I left his office, my phone buzzed. Daycare. Another delivery had arrived. I picked it up myself this time. It was a box, lavender tissue paper inside, 2 small pillows embroidered in cursive. Linda Jr. A handwritten card read, "To my legacy, never forget who you are." It wasn't just about control, it was about rewriting history in real time, one stitch at a time. I didn't cry. I took photos. I attached them to the file I'd already shared with my lawyer. I uploaded them to the cloud folder labeled Evidence Ongoing. That evening, I logged into my social media account, something I rarely used anymore, and I wrote a post, not to argue, not to shame, but to set the record straight. Misuse of legacy is not love. It's theft masked as sentiment. Within minutes, messages began flooding in. Some were from old friends who had stopped talking to me after Velma's campaign of charm. Others were from women I didn't know, women who had gone through the same thing. Messages like, "My ex-mother-in-law tried to get custody while I was recovering from surgery. She called my baby by a different name for 2 years. Thank you for speaking up. We're told to stay silent for the sake of peace. You reminded us, silence isn't peace." And then came the message that stilled me. A woman named Bernice. Profile picture of a wrinkled face and kind eyes. She wrote, "Velma did this to her own sister, took over the estate, changed the records. No one believed me. I'm glad someone sees it now." Later that night, I was searching through an old email backup looking for receipts when I found something I hadn't known I saved. A photo. It was me at age 5, sitting on the front steps of this very house. My mother, Marcelle, stood beside me, holding the original deed in her hand, smiling like she'd just signed her name into the future. I printed the photo and placed it in a white frame. I hung it next to Lyra's crib. This house never belonged to Velma. It always belonged to the women who protected it. The phone rang just before midnight. It was my lawyer. We got the court date. The hearing for the property claim is set for next Friday. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan slowly turning above me, letting the rhythm settle my breathing. One more round. Monday morning was supposed to feel like a new week, a clean start, but it began with the same sinking tension that had camped in my chest for months. I double-checked Lyra's diaper bag, strapped her into her car seat, and drove us to the new pediatrician's office. New name, new provider, fresh beginning, so I thought. When we walked in, the receptionist looked up with a bright smile. "Linda Jr., you're all set. Just head back to exam room 2. I froze mid-step. "No," I said firmly. "Her name is Lyra Jacobs." The receptionist blinked. "I'm sorry, that's what's listed in our system." "I need you to pull her full record," I said, calmer than I felt. "Audit every change, and tell me when it was last updated." She hesitated. "Would you like to speak to our records nurse?" "I'd like to speak to your supervisor. I am her legal parent. No one else speaks for my daughter." She nodded and quickly disappeared behind a door. Even after restraining orders and court filings, Velma still found ways to haunt us. After a 20-minute delay, the clinic administrator came out and apologized. There had been an update submitted by a family representative, a name that wasn't mine. We've flagged the file and will permanently lock the legal name field after your confirmation, she assured me. I nodded. I want that in writing. After the appointment, I drove home with Lyra sleeping in the back seat, the hum of the car the only thing keeping my emotions from boiling over. There was no more shock, only fatigue and the need for boundaries that couldn't be crossed again. When we got home, Jarrell's car was already in the driveway. He was sitting on the porch steps, hands clasped between his knees, looking like someone preparing to confess to something they should have said a long time ago. "Can we talk?" he asked as I carried Lyra inside. "About what?" I asked, not slowing down. "Not as husband and wife," he said, following me in. "As Lyra's parents." I laid her in the crib, turned on the monitor, and met him in the living room. He looked exhausted, but this time I didn't soften. "I know I've been absent," he started. "I let my mom hijack your voice because it was easier than standing up." I let the silence settle before responding. "You watched her bulldoze me and you looked the other way. You didn't just make it easier for her, you made it impossible for me." He rubbed his hands together. "I was wrong. But I want to fix this." "I don't think this is something you fix," I said. "This is something you stop letting continue." He opened his mouth, closed it again, and nodded slowly. Later that afternoon, I stood in the hallway with 3 cardboard boxes neatly stacked by the door. One labeled closet, another bathroom, the last office. I didn't pack out of spite. I packed out of clarity. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not fight, but walk away before you become who you hate. Jarrell returned home from a walk to find the boxes waiting. He didn't say much. Neither did I. We had said everything we needed to already. That night, I opened my laptop and logged out of the family group chat. I deleted Velma's contact. Then I opened a new browser window and created a blog. Private for now, just for me, and maybe one day for others who needed to know they weren't alone. I titled the first post, "Exit Wounds," and I typed, "I didn't lose a family. I reclaimed my name." When Lyra drifted off to sleep, I kissed her forehead and adjusted the blanket over her small frame. The monitor glowed beside me on the nightstand. I exhaled slowly and leaned back. Then came the knock. It was soft, measured. I opened the front door and saw the package sitting alone on the porch. No name, no return address. Just a note taped on top. "If you think you've won, you haven't met the real me yet." Courtroom number 3 was filled before I even stepped inside. A buzz of whispers swirled in the air, quiet enough to seem polite, loud enough to know they were about me. I walked in holding 2 things, the original deed in its protective sleeve and a printed transcript of every voicemail Velma had ever left me since this began. The most recent one still echoed in my head. "If you think you've won, you haven't met the real me yet." Velma arrived 20 minutes late, draped in her usual drama, hat, gloves, and a cream suit she used to wear to church fundraisers. She carried a Bible under one arm like a shield, not a book. Her expression screamed piety, but her eyes flicked to me like she was scanning for weakness. The judge entered. We stood, sat, then began. My lawyer spoke first. No theatrics. Just documents and facts, audio transcripts, registration forms, photographs, the property records. A notarized statement from the daycare director. And finally, the full deed, with my name, my mother's signature, and a witness statement from Aunt Darcelle. Velma's lawyer tried to object. She's a grieving grandmother. The language in her messages, while harsh, came from pain. I stood then, and for the first time during all of this, I spoke directly to the judge. "This isn't about property," I said, clear and steady. "It's about control, and control is not the same as love, it's not legacy, and it's not inheritance." The judge didn't flinch. He nodded, looked back at the folders, then at Velma. His ruling was simple, but it rang through the room like a gavel to the gut. Ms. Velma Jacobs is hereby stripped of all legal access, contact, or property claims regarding the estate and minor in question. A protective boundary is extended for 1 year, pending review. Someone in the back gasped. One of Velma's church friends stood up and quietly left. Velma sat frozen. No tears, just silence. I don't think she ever thought this would actually happen. Afterward, my lawyer leaned in. "That's not just a win," she said quietly. "That's a precedent." The next morning, I opened the package that had been sitting on my porch since the night of Velma's last threat. Inside was a worn family Bible. On the inside flap, scrawled in jagged ink, "You think you erased me, God will judge." I didn't flinch. I didn't tear it apart or throw it away. I placed it in a plain cardboard box labeled in black marker. Archive, not forgotten, just removed. Then I slid it onto the top shelf of the hall closet and shut the door. Later that afternoon, I found a photo buried deep in my email backup. It was me, about 5 years old, standing on the porch of this very house, Marcel's hand gently resting on my shoulder. She was holding the original deed in her other hand, smiling like she'd won something only she understood. I printed it, framed it, and hung it next to Lyra's crib. That house never belonged to Velma. It belonged to women who knew how to protect something, not possess it. By the end of the week, I published my first blog post under my full name, no initials, no aliases, no blurred photos or anonymous KJ. The post title, "The Name She Couldn't Steal." I wrote, "I didn't fight to erase her. I fought so my daughter wouldn't spend her life editing herself to keep peace that never existed. I fought for names, for clarity, for lineage that doesn't weaponize legacy." Within 24 hours, it was shared by parenting advocates, therapists, and women who'd been told their strength was too much. The comment section flooded with names I didn't recognize but stories I knew by heart. That night, I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee while Lyra slept inside. I looked out over the yard, the porch light flickering like it always did near the mailbox. A breeze moved through the trees, steady and soft. She couldn't steal my baby. She couldn't steal my name, and she'll never touch my peace.